I primarily work with relationships. That can mean couple therapy or therapy with more than two partners. I also specialize in working with trauma, particularly complex or developmental trauma. And so I often work with couples where one or both partners have a trauma history. And I chose relationship therapy because I'm so constantly inspired by what love can do, how transformative and healing it can be. And I think it fits nicely in some cases with trauma therapy because trauma is often a relational injury. And so relational healing can be the most effective and appropriate way to treat it. I use an approach called EFCT, or Emotionally Focused Couple Therapy. EFCT is based in attachment theory, and its basic assumption is that all behavior makes sense in context. If we understand everything going into a relational moment, we can understand why people do what they do, why it works for them, and why it's creating distress in the relationship. That gives us a path to addressing the core fears that we all have, reducing conflict and strengthening the bond between partners. One thing I talk about a lot is how two people can have the same interaction with each other, and then when they try to recall that interaction, they have very different versions of what happened. I think a lot of times people will have an argument, and then later when they talk about that argument, they get into another argument about what happened. And there's a reason for that. We encode memories based on our emotional experience of that moment and our current emotional state when we're trying to recall that memory. And so it actually makes perfect sense that two different people in two different positions during an argument, right, are going to have very different memories of what happened. And that's one of the ways that we make sense of conflict and make sense of what's going on an emotional level so that we can really understand what's happening. I love being witness to someone taking a risk and it paying off. I think in relationships especially, but really all across the board in life, trust and safety is built out of risks that pay off, right? That we take a risk, we reach, we make ourselves vulnerable, we try something different. And when that's successful, it builds this sense of safety, a sense of trust in the other person, a sense of trust in ourselves that we had good judgment, that we made the right decision. And that's one thing that I try to facilitate as a therapist, is taking, good risks that have a high chance of paying off, because I think it changes really our sense of ourselves in the world and our sense of ourselves in relationship. I think therapy can be one of those risks that really pays off if you find a person that fits with you and an approach that fits with you. One thing I will say is that couples often wait quite a long time to go to therapy. I think we think that couple therapy is only for relationships that are in some certain amount of distress, and we either aren't yet in that amount of distress or we are worried that we might be. And I would encourage you not to wait too long. I think the longer that we wait, the more entrenched those patterns become. And what starts off as kind of a fairly simple change can turn into a really complicated one after 20 or 30 years of repetition. Right? So the best time to intervene, I think, is always now.